The building, I like it. It's actually much better than before. It's give right down street better looking, busier, make it busier, more active. Yeah, I like it. You remember a few years ago, right down the street wasn't like this busy and active. That's why you see new businesses open, barber shop, coffee shop, restaurants.
Everyone that goes there seems to be extremely respectful of the place, and even it's really nice seeing disabled in their wheelchairs playing basketball as well, and getting there as a collective group of people playing against each other. It would give people from different wealth backgrounds the ability to communicate and get together in a communal space. So I guess in that respect, the kids would be able to be integrated from all walks of life. I have never seen so many people play late night basketball in my life. Yeah, it's like used at all hours of the day. It looks beautiful as well, and I'm gonna use it as well. I haven't done so yet, but I did just text my housemate today saying we need to buy a basketball.
I really like their building. It's nice to work across from it. I'm not 100% sure how it's used inside, but I do find that a lot of people are sitting in the garden area at the front. We get the sun on the wrong side of the street, so a lot of customers like to sit over there. We've had a few customers even asked if they can have coffee over there just in glasses, and they can return the glasses when they're finished. It's quite nice instead of getting takeaways. I see a lot of people using that space on the corner, even just to take photographs. A lot of people are using the area. I think it lifts the strip along here because there's not a nice public area, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that's what the intention is, but it's nice to see people using it as a meeting place rather than on the corner at the traffic lights. I think it's a lovely building too. It's not really in your face. It's nice and mellow. It really blends in with the school and the residential area as well.
I like that we can have some shade because I don't really like the sun much. Because when it's raining, you can go under the collar. I like the water drops, and you get to drink the water drops when it comes down. We do science under the collar sometimes, like experiments. When it's shady, we put water on the ground in the collar. Then when you come back from 10 minutes or 20 minutes, the water is gone. This weekend, on Monday, of the 2 weeks holidays, on the college is going to be a barbecue and halal feeding, story time and games. Activities in the college. When it's Monday, we're going to have a grill, and the most nicest part that is halal, so I can eat it. Okay. This Monday, I'm going to love the races under the college, like spoon. You have a spoon in your mouth, and you have an egg, and I love it.
Well, welcome everyone. My name is Associate Professor Ben Cleveland, and I've been an academic here in our Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning for a little over 10 years, and I'm really proud of what's on today. It's a wonderful celebration of a research project we've been doing for the last 3 years called the Building Connections Schools as Community Hubs project, and this panel discussion and of course the exhibition upstairs is a great celebration of 3 years' work by many, many people. I'd like to open by acknowledging that we're on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, Wominjeka, and just acknowledge that they've been here for thousands of years, the custodians of these lands, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. As I said, this panel discussion today about why design matters for schools as community hubs is very much connected to our exhibition upstairs, Sharing Schools, Building Communities, and is the first in a series of 5 events that we're going to hold over the next 6 weeks. And it's really nice to see so many people here today for this opening event. We thought we would start with this focus on why design matters, and I think watching that wonderful video compiled by Sandy Law's Law Architects has tuned you in to why design matters for schools as community hubs. There's a lot of great thinking and work that can go into building stronger school and community relationships, and we've been particularly trying to understand those relationships through the infrastructure, through the facilities that enables those kinds of relationships to flourish. As I said, the first in a series of events over the next few weeks. In terms of the panel tonight, we've got 4 guest speakers. Sandy Law here on my right, Simon LeNepveu from Clark Hopkins Clark Architects, Rahat Arain from Siraat College up in Epping, and Andrew Lilliman from ARM, and I'll introduce them a bit more formally shortly. In terms of format, what we've asked them to do is to share some stories about some projects that they've been involved in over past years, and Sandy's going to talk a bit more about the Carlton Learning Precinct, and to give each of them about 5 minutes to share their stories about how they've worked with communities to create new facilities, and how the architecture has contributed to those school-community relationships, and what sort of design elements, great schools as community hubs can deliver in terms of the affordances and the resources to communities beyond just the students and the teachers at those schools. So without further ado, let's get on with it, and then after about 20 minutes we'll open for a range of questions from yourselves, and of course I've got some questions for our guest speakers as well. So without further ado, Sandy. Sandy Law is the founder of Law Architects, an internationally renowned architectural studio that centres on places for learning and community enabling projects. Sandy's work is sustained by a strong belief that spaces have the power to transform, heal and enable connection to community and the environment. And I'll hand you, Sandy, the clicker so that you can move through some wonderful slides. Thanks, Sandy.
Well, I'm looking around the room and I'm suspecting there's a lot of architects and a lot less educators. Are there any educators in the room? Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Yes. And I won't talk too long because you've just seen this fabulous little video that I think encapsulates a fairly fabulous project that we were very fortunate in being able to work on, and with an incredible community of individuals and people and community. And just to recognise Kat Peasley, who isn't here today, who had been managing the back end, what we call the back end of the project, through the did a lot of the hard yards. I was heavily involved in a lot of the design and early phases of the project, a lot of the stakeholder engagement, but I think credit to the people on a team that really carry forward on a project right through to the end, because that is really hard. I tended, I think, to get a lot of the fun part. The stakeholders, just to note the stakeholders, there were 3 major stakeholders: Department of Education, our client, and Carlton Primary School, the primary school, and City of Melbourne. And there was also a couple of stakeholders, Melbourne University, Ben was involved there a few phases, and the Coleman Foundation as well. So very diverse stakeholders after very different with very different agendas, and a very significant component of our work was trying to tease out and understand the different pressures and pain points of all of those individuals and the agendas that they all had. I think probably the big focus that we spent a lot of time, and probably a lot more time as architects than a lot of people recognise, and I think you probably all understand the same, those of you that are designers. We try to embed into the project a conversation around what can we give over to the public realm, what actually belongs to a wider community rather than just the people that are coming in and out of those doors during the day as well. So a beautiful aspect of this project was trying to fray the edges, create a really porous entry point, a really porous frontage on numerous edges, or with numerous edges, and work that hard. So I think that's probably my 3 minutes up, is it? Yeah. Edges, that's all. Thresholds, that's probably the main game for this project.
Thanks so much, Danny. So we're really trying to give some snapshots here. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind passing that over to Simon. We'll pass to Simon to tell us about another really fascinating project, but this one not in central Melbourne, but in the outer suburbs.
So the project I'd like to talk about today is the Officer Education Precinct. And the reason I was really drawn to use this as an example to talk about today is it's a really complex and engaging project that involved a lot of stakeholders over the course of a lot of years as well. And Ben mentions it in a completely different context, officer on the growth corridors of Melbourne. When we first started working on this project, it was a complete greenfield site. So we were designing and thinking about a community that wasn't necessarily there yet. And from the very initiation of this project for this precinct, it was there was a strong community push for a special needs school to service the officer area. And this site was targeted for that. And also as part of that was a secondary college, which was part of the precinct. So I think the reason I want to bring this project to attention is the really thorough, engaging process of all stakeholders from the very inception of the project vision. Even when we were, had that blank bit of paper and that paddock out in the middle of nowhere, there was the Department of Education, there was a whole bunch of passionate community members, parents who were advocating for schools in their community. There was early engagement with the Kidinia Council. Even though at that early stage they were not really part of the project, but it was a really strong aspiration in building something for this growing community where there wasn't a lot of community infrastructure, that all aspects were engaged. The education union was engaged, and we had a lot of really rich, deep discussions very early on about what does this community need, and how do we think holistically about this precinct, so we can encapsulate a master plan that can engage all that, which was a really rigorous process. And the first stage of works was actually the delivery of the officer specialist school, which was the real key priority need. But where the really strong community partnerships came on board was actually when the second stage, the secondary college, came on board. And because of the really rigorous engagement of the broader community early on, and this is years before, when it came time to start delivering the secondary college, we were able to actually open up conversations with local council to tap back into what's the community priorities, what are the community needs at a very early stage. And because there was that early buy-in engagement at the vision stage, through a little bit of luck around timing, but also that early engagement around community need, we were actually able to tap into council and come back to them and say, wouldn't it be great if we can get some more community-based infrastructure here around sport? And we originally pitched them that the school's building a stadium. Wouldn't it be great if we could build a 2-court stadium? And they came back to us and said, well, that's not really going to work for us because our need's greater, so we need a 3-court one. And because of those early conversations around master planning, we were really careful to not master plan opportunities out and make sure that everything was still on the table. And from there, those engagements sort of snowballed and grew. You can see photos up there of the 3-court stadium. But there was about strategic priorities around not just necessarily netball and basketball, but having a really multi-purpose facility around different types of sports. And Also, as part of this process, we were lucky to have a community broker on board as well, which was able to tap deeper into the community need around what are the other things that this community needs, which led to some partnerships around community performing arts, which in turn snowballed into tapping into some funding around getting some expanded performing arts facilities and some more community rooms. And what started out is some early conversations around a blank bit of paper really sort of grew and evolved into a situation where we were able to have a special needs school, a secondary college and a community hub all master planned and considered in as one, and really implemented quite equitably too. That was one of the main sort of aspirations we had at a very early stage, that this was a precinct, and it was a precinct for the community, it was a precinct for the secondary college, it was a precinct for the special needs, and everyone had shared value and shared common purpose. And one of the, I suppose, the main gestural things we did that is everyone had an equitable frontage, everyone had an equal sense of presence, so that it was a real strong crew that everyone is valued here and everyone has a really strong role to play. So I might leave it there, Ben.
Thanks, Simon. We'll pass the clicker back to Rahat. And I'll just introduce Rahat Arain, who is the co-founder and foundation principal of Al Siraat College, which commenced in 2009 with a small group of 80 students in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. Continuing at the college, Rahat now serves over 1,000 students in a role as the Director of Curriculum, Learning and Innovation across Foundation to Year 12, and she'll tell us a little bit about the journey at Al Siraat.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I hope I'm going the right way. Yep, okay. There's going to be some photos here that I'll talk to, but great to see that we've got educators here. It's wonderful because I think community means a lot, not just for designers, architects, but for schools. As we work within our communities, we realise how important our facilities are for more than the immediate stakeholders that are in the school, but the surrounding as well. And so we've been very, very fortunate that we had a pretty much a beautiful site to work with. In our early years, we even had a cow walk through our gate, so figure that. We don't have that happening anymore, but it's really important to kind of understand what are the requirements of the community. So we've worked with our community. In fact, before we actually started the school, as one of the co-founders, it was, well, why do we want a school? What is the reason? And the driving reason behind that was, well, we want it to be more than a school. We want to actually be a community. So it's been a driving force for us from the start. And so these pictures I'll just share with you briefly in terms of some of the ways we connect with the community. We're by no means at a very high level, but we do what we can with the facilities that we have. And I think that's what parents and community members actually appreciate, is that we have the approach of being able to share our space, and we believe in that partnership. We believe that we often used to say it takes a village to raise a child, so we want to be more than an institution only for students. It's a lot more than that. So you'll see some pictures here, the one with the gardening. That was a bit of a project we started off for getting parents a little bit more interested in the environment, as well as connecting with each other as well. So the parents would come in and do a bit of gardening. The other picture that you see on the right side of the screen, where we are an independent school, a faith-based independent school, and so prayers are a really, really important part of what we do at school, not only during the school hours where our students participate in prayers, so we have a small prayer facility at school for students, but we have prayers 5 times a day. We have prayers in the special month of Ramadan, and it gets extremely busy at 9 p.m, 10 p.m. at night, and the whole car park is full of community members. So this is just a small example of one of our school buildings where simply we just converted the area that was the art space, and in the evening they were doing prayers here. So we do have bigger plans. We've moved on from there since then. This other picture you see on the left is where we held an open invitation to the community, and so we did get people coming from far away, but we were approached to have special speaker from overseas come, and he was very, very popular. So we ended up, I don't know, probably about 1,000 people coming for that. It was pretty much just our soccer field. Rented a bit of a stage to go with it, the sound system, and I think it's more about the intention if we want to get involved to get that going. And the one picture on the right there you can see is where we're having some information sessions about healthy eating. So using the opportunity to educate the community there. Sorry. Converted one of our newer parts of a building that is sort of like an auditorium into an International Women's Day event that was held recently. And the whole place got transformed because, looking so pretty, we've got the table set up and guest speakers and so forth. Very different to the picture on the right-hand side where you have children jumping up with bubbles, and that was our early story time, so for the children prior to school. So there's a variety of kind of events that we've been involved in, and that's the end of that. So we're quite fortunate in that as we are still developing as a school, and I guess I shouldn't apologise for the designers and architects here, but we really give them a hard time. We like to push boundaries with them and say, can you give us a bit more of this? And we just decided this idea as well, how can you fit that in? And so, whilst we give them a hard time, but we actually enjoy the interaction because this is why we do it. It's for building of the community, and that's what is most important for us. It's more than an institution for educating the children. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt Rahat. And I'll introduce Andrew Lillyman. And there is a serendipitous moment here because when I called Andrew just to have a quick chat about today's session, he told me that they've just been appointed to design a new mosque at Rahat School. So totally serendipitous that we'd invited both of the speakers previously, and now they have a working relationship that hopefully she won't give you too hard a time, Andrew.
I don't mind. That's fine.
Andrew Lillyman's a director at ARM Architecture and essential to many of ARM's most significant projects around Australia. His interest in the role of architecture in the public realm and communities has been recently applied to education projects, First Nation buildings and social housing, exploring the potential of architecture to create mutual benefits for both users and communities. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Ben. I don't mind getting a hard time, so that's fine. I bent the rules slightly. I haven't shown one project. I've shown a number of them, mainly to give a sort of reflection of what the office is sort of thinking about when we're doing these sort of projects. But when we're asked to kind of look at what is the benefit of design for community hubs, we are always thinking first, what are the user groups that we're designing for here? What is the facility for? And what community we are in? And the architecture sort of sits on that line, that sort of interface or that overlap between those two. So, for example, this is a project we're currently designing. This is for a First Nations group up in Shepparton, which Melbourne Uni are actually a part of. And it is a very important group. They have a very unique identity that they want to have reflected in their architecture, and the way that identity and look of the building actually interfaces with its public realm and community. It is a group that has a very long sporting history in AFL and other sports, and also obviously a very deep cultural history as well across New South Wales and Victoria. So they're a very special group, and they have very unique kind of spatial requirements and ways that they want to interface with the public. So that is a great project to be working on. We also look at communities that are changing in terms of their demographic. This is North Melbourne Hill Primary School. North Melbourne has changed from what used to be sort of workers' cottages, terrace houses, semi-industrial, and now it's becoming more social housing and health. The hospitals are there, health infrastructure type type work. Sites are getting more expensive, sites are smaller, schools are taller, there's a premium on outdoor space for kids. In this particular one, we've got a early learning centre on the roof. And then whilst we're also exploring that notion of a changing community, something that acknowledges both old North Melbourne and the new, and the possibilities of the new. And then, of course, how those spaces of the building actually start to interface with the community in terms of sport and health, etc. We're also looking at new communities that are really just emerging, where there is nothing, and the school is potentially the first building to emerge out of the ground. And this is a VSBA school bundle project, which is open next year, out sort of near Tarneet / Werribee kind of areas. And this is another exciting project. We're looking at, when the school is the first thing there, what the identity of this community can actually be, and helping to try and establish that. And again, we're looking at a deeper history of the site. There are features to the site, but there's virtually nothing there, but a deeper kind of Indigenous history, and having early consultation and involvement to kind of design in thematics in a significant way to the architecture, and how that interfaces again with the community. And then, as Ben said, the project that we're looking at for Siraat College, and really how architecture can reflect the aspirations of a community and a school that has values and traditions, and really this is a kind of generous project for the community. As you know, these sort of facilities are major kind of gathering spaces for the community and the school combined. And then communities that are really well established. This is St Leonard's College down in Brighton. We've been there for a while and are part of the scene down there, but are now lucky enough to create other fantastic facilities like theatres, again, which are real kind of cultural focuses for that community, and bring people into the school. I think that's me.
Thanks so much, Andrew. So look, what we've done there is we've tried to sort of showcase, some of the kinds of work where facilities play such an important role in that interface between, what we would notionally think of as the school community in most instances, that those people who are there every day, Monday to Friday. But I guess what our research has been about, and what we've been trying to showcase today, is that this infrastructure can play so many more roles as a resource for so much more than a school. We will open up to questions from the audience, and I think Beck Collis is going to roam around with the microphone to field some of those questions. But perhaps I might start by throwing a few questions to our panel as well. And maybe, Rahat, maybe I could start with you and just sort of explore a little bit further that notion of gathering spaces, both large and small. Can you tell us a little bit more, and both inside and outside as well? Just tell us a bit more about the value having environments for people to get together.
Sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. I guess the gathering space is a very, very important aspect of our faith as well. So we gather together 5 times a day as well for prayers, for example. The service component itself in part of our faith is an important part as well. So providing those opportunities for community to come together to gather. Sometimes it's to celebrate, sometimes it's to worship, sometimes it's to get the education, and sometimes it's like celebrations. Like where we had a recent wedding and they wanted to use the facility, so even doing those kind of miniature little projects, or like in the example that I had in the photo where we were approached to have a special speaker from overseas, and we have a big space for it. I guess we're being light on our feet, being independent. We don't have the red tape that maybe in some larger corporate organisations where you've got to go through a lot of hoops. So as part of the gathering space for a school community, I think it's really important to keep it as accessible as possible. Yeah.
I'll be looking for hands in the audience when those questions arise. I think probably it's also worth saying that, of course, showcasing all these great facilities and what they're offering is relatively easy, but of course bringing these projects to fruition is actually really quite challenging and often very, very complicated. That's really been the topic of our research for the last year is how do we help people navigate what we've been referring to as the obstacle course that sometimes these projects present. There's sort of very complicated policy arrangements and obviously funding and bringing the stakeholders together, the relationships. Simon, we've talked about this at length, Clark Hopkins Clark being one of our project partners and deeply involved in these things. Simon, even today we were talking about some of the challenges of working with communities and stakeholders and bringing them together. Can you perhaps just talk a little bit more about that process of working with multiple groups to align their thinking?
Yeah, sure, Ben. Look, I think we probably all know and understand that bringing multiple people together is a tricky thing. For us, I think the key part of that being a successful process is really deep engagement and really deep engagement early. And it really needs to start right at the beginning when you're setting the vision and the aspiration for a school, setting a vision, aspiration, and community. So everyone buys into that, and that vision is really shared and owned by everyone. And in the example I gave at Officer, I think that was really one of the main reasons of success, that we all built that vision together, and we all sort of, the late night workshops and discussions around, well, what do we want to create for this community? And if you can create that really strong sense of buy-in right from the beginning, when you start to hit the obstacle course and you hit the hurdles and everyone's arguing about the joint use agreements and all those kind of things, you can actually bring it back to the vision. Like, what are we aspiring to do here? And it actually can be used as a bit of a tool to unblock the blockers, because if everyone understands and shares that same vision, they have that same aspiration, then when the things get hard, because there is always the risk when things get hard, you're just going to go, oh, this is too hard, and it's not going to happen. But if there's that strong sense of ownership for everyone, then that needs to be the motivation to keep going. And I'll come back to that example at Officer. That's there were times in that process where for the community hub it was getting really hard and this wasn't going to work, and we were going to build the building quicker than they could sign the joint use agreement. But having gone through that process once and navigated through it, the next phase, which was Gumscrub Creek Primary School, which was also part of that same education precinct, the conversation was very, very different the next time, and Cardinia were coming to the department and saying, we want to be part of this, and we want to get some more community infrastructure in here because we see the value and we see the benefit, and we've shared that journey with you, and we really, really deeply believe in it. All of the obstacles and hurdles were, all the more smoother the next time around because that high level of trust and buy into the vision was already created.
Thanks, Simon. Again, if you've got questions, please pop in. That's my wife, Bella. I promise you I didn't set this up.
Okay, hopefully that's okay. I work with children, so this is going to be a bit of a biased question. Where's the space for the child voice in the visioning and the planning process? And perhaps if anyone could talk through an example of what that's looked like in practice, that'd be great.
Andrew or Sandy, do you want to take that one on?
We can both. I'll start. I think there are many touchstones that needs to play out during a process, and it's highly dependent on the project, Bella. I think there's examples that we've all had where there's been really successful workshopping with students in early master planning phase, walking around sites, having students talk about where they sit in the winter, where the sun is, where they feel safe. why they feel safe, and trying, as part of an exercise of newcomers to a place, but us being sort of part of the architecture team or design team, come in and understand what is actually going on, and that's one aspect. And then there's numerous places along the journey that they really need to be involved in interrogating, whether it be conversations for half a day or 3 days, almost, on lockers, which we have had in the past. Where do we store our stuff? Yeah.
I would also refer to a job, the Manara job, the one up in Shepparton, which is with that Indigenous group, and that is an education for facilities of kids of all ages, and they're often being educated together. And they're an important touch point / workshop group that we have to keep going back to, and they are very vocal about what they want, and are happy to kind of contribute to the design language, what they like about certain spaces. We present them with other architectural precedents and say, which one of these do you like? What and why do you like them? What are the values of your community, and how do you want to see them in your building? So it is very hands-on in a workshop sense. Yes.
I might move on to another question of mine while we wait for others. Sandy, I want to ask you, one of the interesting things about this project, just locally here at Carlton Primary School, is the brief for that project briefed an indoor gymnasium. Yet that's not what you've delivered. No. How do you work within the constraints of government project briefs and deliver what the community really needs? How did you change the narrative to deliver them a covered outdoor learning area, a COLA, which is basically a covered court, but has won all sorts of urban design awards now? How did you change that conversation?
Yeah, look, it was a really really interesting conversation, and I think, as happens to a lot of us, the conversation is very much seated in costs as well. We went through a fairly exhaustive exercise in a built fabric, in analysing the building. So we're talking about languages before, but built different languages. Really understanding the existing buildings that we were actually required to deliver as part of the project refurbishment, and it became highly evident that the old 70s building was in much greater need of refurbishment extent than had been understood. And the opportunity also arose, the thinking around a gymnasium on that corner of Palmerston and Rathdown, and the ownership of that, and how how exclusive that would have been in terms of an indoor court, and the uses of that would have been a lot more exclusive than has occurred as a virtue of it being an external space which is used for whether it be voting days, or they have a lot of after hours use all through the day and night. Weekends, skaters are using it during the afternoon, I think, or late afternoon into the evening. And market days as well. So we're mapping a whole series of uses that occurred throughout the site before the gym, and then recognising actually where do they go, where do they land on a really tight urban site if we were to put a gymnasium there. And we did a lot of lobbying and a lot of work with the stakeholders. And once we had the VSBA and the school on board, it was good to go.
And I think you've set quite a precedent there. I think we'll probably see more of those, particularly in the inner city sites.
The cold.
I can see Janet Clinton's hand up the back there.
I'll speak really loudly. Is that all right? Feature voice. I'm not sure I'm allowed to ask a question, Ben, but I will. It was great to see the interface, the design for the interface to bring communities into school. Absolutely fantastic. Make schools inviting. I want to go one step further and ask you, how do you get community then to engage in the learning aspect, which is the key fundamental process in schooling? How do you get it so that community will then go one step further to engage in the learning process. Who do you ask about the design, and what would you recommend for the design?
Are you referring to the journey, the process as a journey?
The journey, but literally, what does that look like? How do you get community to actually sit down and read books with kids? What does the design look like, and how do you do that with a whole range of schools and contexts? But how do you get them in? Was the first question.
Yeah, so it's how do you enable community that might not have been there beforehand or have used those spaces?
No, it's not about community. It's about coming from the other end, getting them into the classroom so they're actually engaged in the learning process. Classrooms are barriers to community, and learning is a barrier to community. So how do you open the doors to get them so they'll actually engage in learning?
I'll have a go at that one if that's all right. I think the key thing about this idea of invitation and welcoming community, and Janet, you mentioned around, there's an issue around about the public realm and this sort of welcoming sense of identity of, almost allowing the community to feel like they own part of the school. And we look a lot at when we mastermind schools and design schools about actually identifying what can be a public space and what can be something that it's obvious and overt that the design actually inviting them in to feel like they can take ownership of that space. And then thinking about different levels of further invitation into a school. That's what's that next step of invitation? So the public forecourt is definitely part of that. You want that to be a space the community own and everyone can feel like they can gather there. And then what's that next layer that's drawing the community into that next step? And that might be a bit more of a privileged space where there is a sense of welcome to the community to draw you in, and whether that's through the architecture or other means. So there's a sense that this is a space that can be shared. It can be shared by the community, it can be shared by the school. But also the next step of that is we do need to be cognizant that there's some places in a school that do need to remain private. So I think when you start to think about spaces in those sort of levels of public, privileged and private, and be quite intentional about how you design those spaces, you can allow the opportunities to welcome the community in, to make them feel like they have ownership of spaces and shared use of spaces. But you can make the school feel like that they've still control of their own destiny and what needs to remain private. So by doing that, the aspiration, the hope is that you're creating more opportunities for the community to feel like that's they're part of the school, they have ownership of the school, and that can be used as a bit of an attractor to start to draw them in to the different parts and draw them into the classroom, and because they've already got those strong bonds and they feel like that they've got co-ownership of the school.
That's a great question in terms of how do you actually get them into the buildings. And when prior to COVID, we actually had a very invitational approach to coming into the primary buildings. Our buildings were designed so that they don't have narrow corridors. They're actually sort of like big spaces in between the classrooms. So intentionally that was so that there'd be spaces for them to sit. We'd open up the buildings 10-15 minutes prior to the end of the school day. At the start of the school day as well, it was comforting for them to be able to come in. Obviously, for the last 2 years, we've had to put a big hold on that. But it's the way schools actually do things in their everyday actions that can give the message that is this a place that welcomes people or not. So whatever facilities that we had, we'd see what opportunities do we have to, again, build a warm and welcoming environment, down to the fact we have our own canteen, so we'd keep it open for a while after the morning assembly was over. Parents loved coming in, just grabbing a coffee, having a chat and doing all of that, and then going off. As a school, we often used to joke about, oh no, is this going to be a car park mafia happening? We're going to get complaints going on. But I think if we let go of those fears and really invite parents in and then listen to them, because then not everything works out, but we say, look, we're human, we're here to listen, we're here to adapt things, we take those things seriously. But safety and security are definitely really key as a school. So anything that happens after hours, how do we actually ensure that the community is still using, for example, the prayer facilities, but that anyone coming on site is still safe, the place is still secure, and so forth. And in relation to an earlier question about student agency, if you ask them, they all want, everything they talk about is related to sport. Everything, I mean, even on camps, it's all about the sport. So we're now looking at our master plan so that our sporting facilities are such that you can fence them off. So the school buildings after hours are still secure, but you've got access to the prayer facilities, you've got access to the sporting facilities, and it's great getting them active.
Thanks, Rahat, and great question. Thanks, Janet. And I think probably one we can explore even further at one of our subsequent panel discussions about why hubs matter for schools, because obviously it's got to be a two-way relationship, and there's got to be some great value for the schools and for the students being still the primary purpose that we've got these facilities. There was another question over here. If we wouldn't mind, this might actually, unfortunately, be the last one.
Okay. So this is a question about established schools that often are in heritage buildings, so really old buildings. I wanted to find out a little bit more about the challenges of bringing something fresh and new when there might be a lot of restrictions on the building itself.
Maybe, Andrew, you might like to talk about one. You gave a good example at St Leonard's.
Yeah, so St Leonard's, we had to build a theatre, obviously, that I showed, and there was also an extension to the senior school that they did as well. And there has to be a lot of respect for their existing infrastructure, like their heritage buildings. And we try to not mimic, but try to be a bit sort of futuristic about the direction of the school, and try and build for the next, for the now, for the next 5 years, for the next 20 years, how the school wants to develop. So we certainly kind of develop narratives that the school already has, like some of their values, and then we bring in other kind of creative narratives, to develop a kind of design for their new facilities. So I think that the St Leonard's, or the Leonardian as they call it, the actual theatre, that is a separate building to the existing heritage house right next to it. But when it comes to actually adjoining something, obviously analysing the building enough to make sure that we're tying in safely with it and not destroying it or creating problems. But also we tend to try and make that break with the old bit, show respect to it, but also present this sort of new bold move, because usually the old moves are bold for their time, and we want to be of our time and future as well. Does that make sense?
Quite a complicated question there. Look, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. It's really quite a short, sharp discussion here this evening. Thank you, everyone, for attending. This is, as I said, the first of a number of panel discussions that will take place over the next 6 weeks. We've also got a session throughout one of the days later in August. Pippa's holding up a sign for me to make sure that people know about the Twitter at Shared Schools, Sharing Schools. I'll pop it up if I can. For some architecture studio work that Rob Polglaze and Stephanie and Tina from Clark Hopkins Clark led, and you can see that in the exhibition as well. But the other panel discussions are focusing on what's in it for schools and what's in it for communities when we're talking about schools as community hubs. So we hope you can join us for some of those other discussions. But also, most importantly, we hope you can join us immediately upstairs for the opening of the Sharing Schools Building Communities exhibition. We will have some formalities in about 15 or 20 minutes' time, but there are free drinks, there's nibbles as well, so hopefully that will entice you to stick around for a little while, enjoy what's on display. It's been a wonderful effort by a very, very large group of people. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But again, if you could join me in thanking Rahat, Sandy, Andrew and Simon. Really appreciate... Really appreciate them sharing their time and their expertise with us tonight. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the time. Thanks for coming, and we hope to see you upstairs in a couple of minutes for the exhibition opening. Thanks all.